Episode 26. Make sure you listen to the end. Some good information coming out at the end of this podcast today.
Welcome to Grit Meets Growth, the podcast where we explore getting uncomfortable, making things happen, and creating a magnetic life. Now let's get after it.
This is, in fact, episode 26.
Fills out year number 1 for the podcast.
Pretty exciting times.
It's wild to think we've been doing this for a year. It's fun to think about it. It's fun to go back and look at the some of the other episodes, but it's wild to think we're crossing that 1-year finish line.
And we're just getting started. I'm excited for it.
Absolutely. Speaking of things we're about to finish, finishing year 1 and getting started, we're about to finish 75 hard.
How is that possible, 75 hard? How is it that we only have a week left? Man, there's been some dark days over the last 75 days. But there's been some really bright days too.
You know what's interesting about that? I posted about this last night. I will remember as we kind of come and wrap up 75 hard, the days that I'm going to remember and the days that I'm proudest of are the dark days. They're the ones where I did not want to get out. I didn't want to do that second workout. I wanted to cheat on the food. I didn't feel like getting the reading done. I was tired. It was late. It was cold. That is the marker from 75 hard that I will lean into probably forever, is how I showed up on the days where I didn't feel like it and I didn't want to.
Isn't that one of the key learnings, right? When we talk about mental toughness, that is almost the definition of mental toughness. Like showing up and doing the things that need to be done, even when you don't feel like it. It's living that no excuse, right? When you take excuses off the table, anything's possible.
Absolutely. Here's the thing. Every day since we started this was an opportunity to quit. And I've heard the stories. I've heard the stories from people who have tried it and they made 5 days and they quit. They made 30 days and they quit. They made 60 days and they quit. Every day has been an opportunity to find a reason to quit. And every day has come with 1 or 2 things where there was an option. If you gave yourself room for it, there was always an option. You had to decide that it wasn't an option, that your goal mattered, and it mattered more than your excuse.
I think for me, that's finishing it, pushing through the excuses, pushing through those days that I didn't feel good, but I still got my workouts in. No alcohol for 75 days. Like, that's hard for me. I'll be honest with you. That's hard for me. But I've done it. And I'm actually at the point now where I'm like, I'm almost a little bit scared to have my first drink because what's it going to do? And should I have my first drink or should I just keep going with the no alcohol? Yet to be determined.
That's been my biggest, the biggest thing I've been trying to wrap my head around, especially in the last week, and it will be this coming week as well, is nailing down, now that we're coming to the end, nailing down what's going to stick and what's not. And the reason for that is when I ran Grandma's Marathon 6 years ago, I prepped and I trained and I did everything that I needed to go out and run a marathon. And I hammered it and it was fun and I got it done and I was super proud of myself. And then right after that, Christina and I got started planning for our wedding because I proposed to her at the marathon. Like it was supposed to be at the finish line. It ended up being at lunch that day because the marathon was a little more of a grind than I anticipated. But we went right into wedding planning and I took my foot off the gas and let it go. And all that prep and all that work I had done, it kind of melted away pretty fast once I quit and once I took my eye off the ball. And so that's my biggest, I'm going to call it a fear and catalyst right now is what do I do moving forward? I don't know where you're at with that, if you've been chewing on that at all or not, but.
Let me ask you this. What's the next thing you're going to focus on? I think that's why I came up with 100 push-ups a day for the month of May because I needed something else to look forward to. I don't know. I'm like, what the heck? It's 100 push-ups a day every day for a month. Like, just like I said, 75 hard was going to be easy when we started that. I'm like, 75 days. And then on day 20, you're like, oh man, I got 55 more days to go. I don't know. I felt like I needed to, that's why I came up with that concept. And you and I are going to do that. And I welcome anybody else and our listeners and our community of folks here at Grit Meets Growth to jump in on this. 100 push-ups a day for the month of May. You can break them up over the course of the entire month, whatever, right? But back to the point. That for me, I needed to put something in place to kind of keep me on track coming out of 75 hard. And for me, that was what came to mind.
I think it's goals. We are wired to have goals. We're wired to have something that we're chasing to constantly be growing and making ourselves a little bit better. I found out last week that I get to take this trip to Nepal in October. And it's a hiking altitude trip in Nepal. And one of the things that's kind of one of my next goals is keeping myself prepped and ready for that trip and continuing to train for it. And it without that goal out in front of me, it would be harder to stay on track. But now there's a goal. There is something that I'm working toward. Having the goal is a game changer. And I think that's the big thing is I'm looking at coming out of 75, I'm going to keep my nutrition pretty tight. I'm not just going to go rampant and just start eating everything that I want and every bag of chips and go back to drinking soda if I feel like having a soda. Like I know now, I've proven to myself that I can keep things in check and that I have discipline. I have something I can lean into now. I'm excited about that.
It's huge, right? It's called a mental toughness program for a reason. Yeah, the physical piece of it's great, right? And there are physical changes that we've all experienced through the course of it. But the mental side of it, man, I'm in a way, way different place today than I was, whatever we are, 69 days ago. And it is that feeling of accomplishment that I look most forward to. But I think like you, I've got to have that next goal. I've got to have that next thing to work towards. And I think that's what 75 hard has shown me is that we need those markers in our life. I mean, there is this whole Live Hard program that's been developed as well, which is a year-long program that basically encapsulates 75 hard and additional work. So there certainly is value in that. In order, if Priscilla has built the program that way, there's obviously value in it. But how can we make it our own is kind of what I've been thinking about the last few days. What is it for me specifically? And then like I do, I rally additional people to jump on board. So, we got a handful of people right now, and I'm sure that group will grow.
Absolutely. I think you hit on something. One of the things that 75 hard has taught me is what I'm capable of. I thought I was capable of doing this when we started, and then things got hard and I wondered if I was capable of it. Once I finish, knowing that I'm capable of it opens up a lot of doors, because all of a sudden, every one of those things that I've thought, I wonder if I could do that, my confidence level is amped right now. There is not a lot that I see out in front of me that I wonder if I could do it. The confidence is high.
I had that same instance this morning at the gym. Our gym is doing a collective group Murph, right? So hopefully we get a group of people at the gym doing a Murph on Memorial Day morning. It scares the crap out of me. Running 2 miles, doing 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats. It scares the hell out of me. But I committed to it. I don't know that I would have a year ago. And in fact, I know I didn't, because I didn't commit to it a year ago. Somehow here we are, not even done with 75 hard. And I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Let's do it. Do I have the last 75 days to thank for that? I don't know. Maybe. Kind of feels that way.
I think when you get to that point where you have that bring it on moment, when you can look at something challenging in front of you, whether it's physical fitness, a physical challenge, if it's a work challenge, new opportunity, you're going to start something new. It's a relationship challenge. You're working to make a relationship better or get through a valley. If you can walk into those situations and your mindset is bring it on, you're unstoppable. Too often we get stuck in all the reasons that things are scary, things are tough, things are hard. We make excuses like we've talked about 100 times. Bring it on. Shift the mindset to bring it on and then see what happens.
Well, we've discovered and have really started talking this way over the last year that execution, that movement, that taking that first step and taking the next step and the next step and the next step, that execution is the most important piece. It takes away the anxiety. It takes away the fear. It takes away that unknown, because I don't care what is at the end. I only care about that next step. And yes, we've said that a time and time again, but it's so important. It's important for me. It's one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last year. And maybe it's more of a realization over the last year, more so than a lesson for me, because having been in sales for almost all of my career, picking up the phone, sending the message, doing those things when you don't feel like it, when you're down, is what drags you out of that muddy hole that you're sitting in. It's that movement, it's that execution towards your goals that keeps you motivated. You can make 100 phone calls and just keep getting voicemail. You get one return call, changes your whole world, man.
And that's all it takes is one.
Just takes one.
I'm going to double back for a second. One of the things you said was we've been talking this way over the past year. It's interesting to me, reflecting back on a year of doing this podcast, the conversations we've had over the last year on this podcast together have led to similar conversations with a lot of people in my circle. And what I've realized is I have started to talk different about myself, about my life, about where I'm going, about what matters to me, about my purpose. You hit on this in the last episode. You got to take back control over your words, not let them make you into a slave, not be a slave to your words, not give them power. Having these conversations has changed how I talk. It has allowed me to take control over my words, and how I talk has impacted how I show up. Complete game changer. And it started with my head, with my mind and my mouth. Then the rest started falling into place. Too often we get stuck talking about, oh, this is terrible. This sucks. The news is bad. This is bad. Quit talking about it. Quit talking about it. Start talking about things that are solid, that are good, that are strong, that are positive. Use your mouth in the right way and see what happens.
It's hard to overcome that some days, especially being here in Minnesota with the crappy weather we've had this spring, right? It's hard not to talk about the weather every day. It does have an impact on us. It does affect, the lack of sunshine does affect our mood. There's no doubt about it. But to your point, we can control that. We can control that with our words. We can control that with our conversations. We can control that with our relationships.
We can and we should, but again, you have to take action. You got to move on it. You've got to do the work. One of the things that was interesting, and this is a topic that's come up over and over the last year, but you brought it up again this morning, was circle and the people in our circles. You started digging into that, and it was, I think, a year into this, we've started to create a really cool circle here at Grit Meets Growth, a really good community tribe. But talk a little bit about Circle, because you specifically you hit on the mentor thing, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah. Well, I think when we talk about things, part of my purpose is really about community. I've always been big on community. I've always been, I come from, my dad's side of the family is big. We have a lot of people. I come from getting together with those people often, right? And this whole sense of community, which gives us that sense of belonging, right? Sense of connectedness. So that's part of what my goal in working with you on Grit Meets Growth has been, right? And, I think if you're listening today, make sure to go and follow us on social media, right? Whether that's TikTok, whether that's Instagram, whether that's Facebook, whether it's LinkedIn, right? Follow us, because that's where we're putting message out on a daily basis to make all of us better. But back to your mentorship conversation for a second. When it comes to mentorship, I think the biggest realization for me has been that it's really a two-way street. And isn't that the way any relationship is, right? It should always be a give and take. And that's no different with mentorship. But how do we go about finding mentors? I'd argue it's not real hard. And there's people that come into your life that you end up having a dialogue with, and you go, wow, I really like the way this person thinks. I really like what they're doing. Their mission and what they're trying to accomplish aligns with mine. And all you have to do is ask and start having those conversations. And those conversations could be as simple as something that you're chewing on. And a good mentor, the first thing they're going to ask you is, well, let's dig into it. How can I, what's happening? What are you experiencing? Right? They start asking some questions. And you should be able to do that same thing with your mentor. So I don't think we have to look real hard. One of my mentors is one of my best friends that I've known since I was in grade school. But you know what? We help each other through those times. We always have. There are times where we drift apart. We don't talk to each other for months. But then there are times where we come together and we're talking on a daily basis. It seems like we're always there for each other when we need each other most. What about your experience with mentorship, John?
Here's the deal. I love the way you frame that up, because I think it's easy to overcomplicate mentorship and put it on this pedestal like it's something precious and something almost overly unachievable. So I've got two stories to share. First, when we launched Orange Ball, there's a gentleman that I knew through church, runs an agency larger than ours, 10 years down the path, further than ours, all of these things. And I reached out to him through a friend of mine. And I said, Mike, I want to have a conversation with you. I'm looking for a mentor. You've done what I'm about to do. I know that you have experience that you can share with me. And I would love to draw on that if you're willing to share. And the funny thing was, his response right away was not yes. His response was, let's grab lunch and have a conversation and see how we can help each other. And there was back and forth. And the conversations we've had have been back and forth conversations. And we've created a really great friendship and relationship through that. When I first approached him, I had mentorship kind of on a pedestal, like it was going to be this precious thing. He's made it very back and forth, very approachable, very easy. And he's allowed me to ask questions. He's asked me tough questions, exactly like what you're talking about. And he's helped me find solutions. The second story I have to that, though, is the lunch I had right before we got in and recorded, where I had lunch with a buddy of mine. I would call him a peer. I hadn't thought of him as a mentor until we had this conversation. I would have called him a peer, would have called him a friend, would have called him a client, not necessarily mentor, because we're equal on some level. But the reality of it is, he had multiple times in our conversation at lunch today where he mentored me. And he didn't have to be above me to mentor me. We're equals, we're peers. but he was able to mentor me and use his experiences to help mentor me. And I was able to use some of my experiences and mentor him back. And it wasn't this precious relationship. It was two people helping each other, having conversations and using their experiences to make one another better. That's when things get cool, man. And it doesn't have to be this unattainable thing. You can have it every single day.
And that's your circle, man. They boost your physical and your mental health, right? Pushing each other. Our circle, my circle, we're constantly pushing each other. My circle pushed me out of corporate America into starting my own company. My circle pushed me into you and I forming a friendship, doing business together, and starting this podcast. I've pushed you into doing 75 hard and 100 push-ups a day for the month of May and the Murph. But that's what we do, right? I mean, isn't that for me? Like, I feel like I'm living my best life when all of that stuff is happening, right? When those friendships, those relationships are driving results.
They have to. Your circle should be one of the driving things that helps make you better, helps you grow, helps you evolve, helps you change, helps you get smarter, helps you get stronger. Your circle should be filled with people who do that.
Right on. So tell me more about that smirk that you just had. You did this and had this smirk.
I'm trying to think where it came from. I just think the conversation about circle is interesting because based on our relationship, I have done things in the last year that I wouldn't have done. And I've gotten to a point over the last year where I accept less crap from myself and I see excuses for what they are and I move on them. And if I see an excuse, I kill it and then I move. And I'm doing things I wouldn't have normally done because of you and because of our conversations and because of my circle. I value over the last year, I value my circle a lot more than I did before. I'm much more aware of where it fits in my life, where these relationships fit.
Who you want in it?
Who I want in it, what I want to get out of it, but what I can contribute to it too. Here's the warning sign about circles. Circles are not your opportunity to surround yourself by a bunch of people and take. If you're not contributing to your circle, you're going to get booted out of your circle pretty fast. You want to be in a circle where it's give and it's take, where it's serve and be served. That's a good circle. That's a healthy circle. And that's a strong circle. There's people who end up in your circle who want to get in and they want to take, but they don't want to give. And that's cutting that off is important. Cut it off and cut it off fast. So, but also be the one who in your circle wants to give, wants to serve, wants to provide and help people. That's what circles are for.
I would argue go into it, always asking what you can give first.
100%. Yeah. The interesting thing about these conversations about circles is on some level, they point back to our want to be part of something, want to be accepted, want it to be liked, want to be included. And I was telling you this story earlier. I remember being a kid and I was probably 14 at the time, maybe 13. And coming out of sixth grade, I went to a new private school. So seventh and eighth grade, I was in a new private school. And I remember having a conversation with this girl that I really liked, and she didn't know me. And I convinced her that I don't think I even convinced her. I think I was an idiot at the time. I don't think I convinced her of anything, but I told her that I had grown up in California and that I loved to surf. And the funny thing about that was sitting next to me in a chair was a kid that I had grown up with 3 blocks away from my house in Minnesota who knew that I could barely swim. And I had probably never even been to California. And the reason I share that story is because it pointed back to when I was that age, I was desperate to find my fit. I was desperate for friends. I was desperate for a tribe. I was desperate to find a place where I felt like I fit in and people liked me. And that continued a little bit when I was in high school. And you would think by the time I was out of high school, I would have figured that out. And you're shaking your head no, because you know where I'm going with this. I wondered probably all the way through my 30s if I fit and if I had a spot and if people liked me. And I cared if people liked me, and I still do to a point, but I was like very concerned if people liked me then. And I quit lying and telling people that I was a surfer from California. But like, I still had this aching desire to fit in. I'd go to these networking events and I just want, like, gosh, I just hope people like me. Oh, they probably aren't going to like me. What if they don't like me? Freaking A, who cares? Like, I don't want to say who cares, but like, I had to get to a point where I was comfortable enough with myself and who I was that I could create a circle of people that were strong, that I didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff anymore. And I'm there now, but I wish I knew when I was 14 and 18 and 30 what I figured out now.
You're there now, but there are still those moments, I'm sure, because I still have them.
Totally.
Right? We all want that sense of belonging. I think that's just human nature. But you're right, man. When you find your circle of people that you can be real, that you can be raw, that you can lay it out there, man, embrace that circle for sure. So I got a question. I want to see the picture of what you look like when you were 13 that made you think that you could tell this story that you were a surfer from California. Like, did you have the long flowy locks and,
No.
of that time?
No, there was no, like, I don't
Were
even
you
know
like,
where I came
were
from.
you like Brody from, Point Break?
No, I was a kid who liked skateboards. And I thought if I liked skateboards, I must like surfboards. And I think I thought this girl liked surfboards and surfers. And I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to be what she likes because I want her to like me.
Isn't that all part of, being a kid, being a teenager, is trying to figure out who you are. And yeah, sometimes you make up these stories to try to figure out if that's the group that you really want to be in.
Right.
But it's really interesting when we start to reflect on it, just as you did. Reflect upon that as to where you're at today. But I'd argue we still do some of that same stuff today.
Absolutely.
It's all part of how we develop and mold our circle, right? We've talked about that in the past, right? People come and they go out of that circle all the time. But that's the way it should be. Mm-hmm. Because none of us, not a single one of us ever stays stagnant, right? Our goal is to continue to grow. Sometimes we grow faster than those people in our circle. Sometimes they grow faster than us and they leave on their own. Sometimes we outgrow them and we push them out. Sometimes we outgrow people and we get to a different place and we bring new people in. That's the nature of the beast, in my opinion.
And sometimes that growth is painful. Sometimes that whole experience of people coming in and out is painful. Sometimes the growth is painful. Sometimes getting better comes with growing pains. And
most of the time it's not a maybe, it is painful.
What are you most thinking back over the last year of doing these episodes? What are you most proud of?
I'm proud of the fact that we're here a year later and we're still doing it and we're still having fun doing it. And we still have ideas and content to talk about. I'm having a ball doing this. I've talked about it before. It's therapy for me. These conversations are very therapeutic. The fact that we get to share it with people, the fact that our community and our circle of Grit Meets Growth community continues to grow, pretty proud of that. How about you?
I was thinking about this the other day. I'm proud that we started. I'm proud that we started, that we saw this opportunity, and rather than looking at it and saying, well, I don't even know how to do that. Or what if people don't like it? Or what if they don't like us? Or what if they think we're dumb or whatever? We took a lot of excuses and we set them aside and we said, you know what, we're just going to try it. We're going to go out on a limb. We're going to be bold and we're going to try it. And we're going to see what happens. Rather than wondering in 10 years, what if? Let's just try it. Let's figure things out as we go. There have been plenty of stumbles along the way, plenty of things that we could have done better in the beginning that we are doing better now. And reel this out in 2 years, there are going to be things we're doing in 2 years that will make this look ridiculous. The fact that we started, I got a list of things in my life that I never started that I will always wish I had. This isn't on that list, and I'm proud of that. Yeah. And to your point, it's still fun. This is still one of the highlights of my week, knowing that we have the opportunity to get out in front of people, share our stories, hopefully impact theirs is pretty freaking cool.
Right on.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping this up, I think one of the things that we're excited about is there's a new website. Gritmeetsgrowth.com has a new website. There's some cool stuff on it. You can go there. You can find the podcast there. There's some t-shirts and hats there that you can buy, you can wear to help support the community. You can support the work we're doing to continue creating this content. There's a blog on there. You can subscribe to the blog. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved in what we're doing here. And this is us working to create a group of people who are all moving forward in the same direction and growing and looking for something a little bit more in their lives. So,
yep. I want you all in our circle. That's where we live the most fulfilled life.
And we have the opportunity to do it together.
Right on.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of Grit Meets Growth. We have 2 asks for you as we wrap things up today. First of all, if you enjoyed this podcast or you got something out of it today, we'd love to have you subscribe and follow us so that you can get your ear in on more of these conversations. And the second thing we'd love to have you do is if you heard something today that you think could help somebody else or that they need to hear, we just ask you to share the podcast and let this message be magnetic to as many people as possible. So with that, have an awesome day. Make it happen. Get out there, do the work, and let's get after it.